He came home early, angry and alone. But what he saw in the kitchen changed everything. Los Angeles was melting under a late afternoon sun, but inside the glossy glass towers of Thompson Development Corp, the temperature had dropped to freezing. David Thompson, CEO, 45 years old, crisp suit rumpled, stormed out of the conference room, jaw tight, eyes burning with rage. He didn't say a word as he passed his assistant, who tried to hand him a fresh schedule. The pages fluttered to the ground as the elevator doors slammed shut behind him. 30 minutes earlier, he had watched 6 months of negotiations collapse, an international development deal worth over $200 million gone, just like that. A European investor pulled out last minute, citing ethical concerns about labor practices on one of their projects. It was the kind of loss that made headlines, the kind that cost people careers, and in David's world, someone always paid. By the time he reached the underground garage, 2 department heads had already been fired. A third had been humiliated in front of the board. David barked into his phone at his CFO, cursed traffic on the 405, and finally threw his phone into the passenger seat of his black Range Rover, not caring when it bounced off the console and hit the floor. He wasn't supposed to be home this early. His estate in the Hollywood Hills was usually a place of silence, vast, pristine, and almost always empty when he arrived after dark. That's how he liked it. No one to talk to, no one to explain himself to. But today was different. The iron gates opened slowly. David didn't wait. He gunned the car up the driveway, parked in front of the house, and slammed the door behind him. The marble echoed under his feet as he crossed the foyer, ignoring the scent of eucalyptus from the custom air diffusers, ignoring the panoramic view of downtown LA glowing in the distance. He needed a drink. Maybe 2. He entered through the side hallway that led to the kitchen, a path he never usually took, and stopped mid-step. There was a sound. Singing. A woman's voice, soft, almost whispering, carried through the open kitchen door. It wasn't a song he recognized. A lullaby, a folk tune, whatever it wasn't part of his carefully curated silence. He crept closer, the rhythm of plates clinking gently in the sink accompanying the voice. Then he saw them. Emma Parker stood at the sink, sleeves rolled, her long, dark braid hanging down her back. She was humming while scrubbing dishes. At her feet, a little boy, maybe 3 years old, clung to her leg, holding on like it was the only stable thing in his world. His clothes were simple but spotless, his curly brown hair slightly damp, as if he'd just had a bath. David stood completely still, half concealed behind the doorway. "Almost done, baby," Emma whispered as she rinsed a plate. "Then we'll go home, and you can show me how you count to 20 again. You remember, right?" The boy nodded. "That's right, and tomorrow I'll read you that story again. The one about the little boy who grew up to be a doctor." David blinked. His hands were still clenched from the meeting, but something in his chest loosened. The woman standing in front of him, she wasn't supposed to be here this late. None of the cleaning staff were, but here she was after hours, with a child by her side, doing dishes in silence, singing so softly like the world outside didn't exist. His eyes drifted to the corner of the counter. A worn canvas tote bag rested beside a stack of books. He squinted. Business management, financial planning, digital marketing. What? David's gaze returned to her hands, scrubbed raw, nails chipped. She wasn't just cleaning. She was building something, quietly, carefully. He felt a sudden jolt of memory, sharp, uninvited. His mother, Nancy Thompson, kneeling on a stranger's floor in Riverdale, scrubbing tiles with a toddler. Him, curled up in the corner with crayons. Her voice, low and steady, singing the same lullaby night after night, promising him that life wouldn't always be like this. promising him that if he worked hard, if he pushed harder than anyone else, he'd make it out, that he wouldn't have to kneel in silence to be noticed. He had made it out. But now, standing there in his designer kitchen, watching someone else live that same chapter from his past, he wasn't so sure anymore. Emma turned to dry her hands and picked up her son. "Liam," she said softly, "you know why Mama studies so much?" He shook his head, curling into her neck. "So you can go to a good school, so we can have our own house one day, and so Mama can start her own business, hire other women like me, so we can all have something better." David couldn't breathe. He backed away quietly, returning down the hallway. His heart was pounding, not from anger this time, but from something he hadn't felt in years: shame. In his office, the lights flickered on as he entered. He sat down, poured himself a drink, and stared at the glass without drinking. Why had this scene, this tiny domestic moment, unraveled him so completely? He reached for his laptop. His fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment before he typed into the company's internal HR system. Employee Emma Parker. Her profile came up. Housekeeping, part-time, contractor status, no benefits. But it was the rest that made his stomach tighten. Age: 31. Education: currently enrolled at LA Community College. Business Administration, night program, GPA 3. 9 work history, 4 current clients, private homes, mother diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, dependent. Dependents: 1 child, age 3. Additional notes: has not missed a single scheduled shift in 18 months, known for punctuality, professionalism, and discretion. And then near the bottom in the section marked goals: my dream is to open a cleaning business run by women for women, with fair pay, flexible hours, and childcare support. I believe we all deserve dignity, no matter what work we do. David sat back in his chair. Everything about this woman, her drive, her focus, her quiet strength, contradicted what he had believed about people in her position. That they were lazy, unskilled, invisible. But Emma wasn't invisible. She was impossible to ignore. He looked again at the screen at her file, then back at the closed door of his office. Something had cracked open, and for the first time in years, David wasn't sure he liked the man he saw in the mirror. The silence in David's office stretched deep into the night. The glow of his laptop cast sharp angles across his face, but he barely noticed. The words from Emma's HR file kept echoing in his mind. 4 jobs, night school, a 3.9 GPA, dependent mother, cleaning houses to build a business for women like her. It didn't make sense, at least not in the world he thought he knew. David leaned back, fingertips steepled under his chin. It had been years since anything or anyone had gotten under his skin. He was used to controlling every variable. Every person in his company was either useful, replaceable, or irrelevant. But Emma Parker didn't fit into any of those boxes. She reminded him of someone he hadn't thought about in a long time. His mother, Nancy Thompson. Tough, small-boned, with steel in her spine. She had scrubbed floors until her hands cracked and bled, worked 2 jobs, and still found time to read bedtime stories every night in their 2-room apartment in Riverdale. David remembered watching her count tips on the kitchen table, dividing the bills into piles: rent, groceries, school books, maybe a little extra for a second-hand coat in winter. She used to tell him, "If you want out of this, you'll have to work twice as hard for half the respect." He had taken her words seriously. Too seriously, maybe. That night, something shifted in David. The image of Emma cradling her son, smiling as she dried dishes with one hand and flipped through a textbook with the other, wouldn't leave him alone. It tugged at something buried, something he had paved over with concrete spreadsheets and power suits. The next morning, David arrived at the office unusually early. His assistant blinked in surprise when he greeted her with something dangerously close to kindness. "Good morning, Sheila," She blinked again. Morning, Mr. Thompson." In the elevator, David noticed things he usually didn't. A janitor wiping smudges from the metal paneling, a cafeteria worker pushing a cart of breakfast trays, a deliveryman juggling boxes with one hand while holding open the door for an intern with the other. Had they always been here? Had he really gone this long without seeing them? He shook his head. No time for guilt now. He had a conversation to initiate. That afternoon, he returned home earlier than expected. Emma was in the backyard folding laundry beside a rusted patio heater, Liam drawing dinosaurs on the concrete with sidewalk chalk. She straightened the moment she saw him, shoulders tense, mouth pressed into a professional smile. "Mr. Thompson, I didn't know you were—" "I wanted to talk to you," David said, hands in his pockets. "If you have a moment." Emma blinked, clearly unsure whether this was an interrogation or a termination. "I read your file," he added. Emma tensed. Is something wrong?" "No, that's the thing." David paused. "It's the most impressive thing I've read in a long time." Emma stood frozen, as if bracing for the catch. David nodded toward the folding chair across from her. "May I?" She gestured nervously. "Of course." They sat, a strange quiet stretching between them as Liam continued babbling to himself nearby. "You're studying business administration?" "Yes, sir. At night, LA Community College. I'm in my 4th semester. And those books, financial planning, digital marketing, you're really serious about starting your own company?" Emma nodded slowly. "It's more than a dream. It's a plan. I've had it for years." David leaned forward. "Tell me about it." Emma hesitated. "I want to create a cleaning company that gives jobs to women like me. Single moms, immigrants, people who just need a chance. With fair wages, flexible schedules, and childcare support." "It sounds naive, I know." "It doesn't," David cut in. Emma blinked again, startled. "I think it sounds visionary," he said, "and rare." She studied his face, trying to read his tone. "Why are you asking me all this?" "Because I want to offer you a job, a real one, in my company." Emma stared at him, stunned. I don't understand." "A full-time position," David continued, "in our operations department. Admin assistant to start, but I see potential for more. You'd work regular hours, get full benefits, and actually apply the things you're studying." The silence that followed was heavy. Emma finally spoke, her voice cautious. "I clean houses, Mr. Thompson. I haven't worked in an office in my life." David met her gaze. "You're already doing more than some of my junior managers. You solve problems, you manage time, you analyze costs. You just do it in a kitchen instead of a boardroom. I've built a company from nothing. I know potential when I see it, and I see it in you." Emma looked down, swallowing hard. "What's the catch?" "There's no catch," David said, surprising even himself. "You deserve a shot." Liam trotted over and climbed into her lap, giggling. Emma kissed the top of his head, then looked back at David, with eyes brimming with uncertainty. "I'm not used to people offering me anything," she said softly. "Then maybe it's time someone did." She nodded slowly, unable to hide the emotion breaking across her face. "I don't know what to say." "Just say yes," David said. "The rest will work itself out." 3 days later, Emma stood in front of the mirrored elevator in the towering glass building of Thompson Development, clutching a simple black tote and smoothing the front of her borrowed blazer for the 10th time. The receptionist had given her a guest badge. She still couldn't believe it was real. The lobby was cold, quiet, and massive. Marble floors, polished chrome, sleek furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. As the elevator doors slid open, she stepped inside and pressed the button for the 21st floor. Her heart pounded with every floor she passed. By the time she reached the top, she wasn't sure whether to smile, run, or throw up. The doors opened. A corridor of glass and gold stretched before her, and just like that, Emma Parker, former housekeeper, night student, single mother, stepped into a new world she never thought she'd be invited to. The corporate floor buzzed with its usual rhythm, quiet keyboards tapping, elevator doors sighing open and shut, and shoes clicking briskly across polished stone tiles. But there was something new in the air. Emma Parker. She walked in every morning precisely at 8:55 a.m., wearing the same black blazer and modest heels, carrying a canvas tote filled with notes, study guides, and a second-hand tablet she treated like treasure. No one knew quite what to make of her at first. She didn't speak much, she listened, and she learned fast. Within her first week, Emma had mastered the company's project management software, cleaned up 3 neglected spreadsheets, and reorganized a vendor payment schedule that had been causing chaos for weeks. By the second week, she had quietly flagged a discrepancy in material orders for a residential complex in Van Nuys. Something about the cement quantities didn't sit right with her. On her own time, she dug into the numbers, checked invoices, and built a side-by-side analysis. Then she knocked on David's office door. "You have something?" he asked, glancing up from his monitor. "Yes, sir. I think there's a problem with the Nordman Heights project." David raised an eyebrow. "That's a senior team file." "I know, but I noticed some inconsistencies in the order forms. It looks like someone overestimated the amount of cement needed by 18%. That's nearly $60,000 in overspending, or possibly misreporting." David stared at her for a moment. Then he waved her inside. "Show me!" Emma laid out her data page by page, calm but visibly nervous. When she finished, David leaned back in his chair, stunned. He picked up his phone. "Get Greg in here, now." That afternoon, a full audit was launched. Emma had been right, and everyone knew it. Over the next few weeks, whispers began to creep through the office. "She's too smart for a housekeeper," one executive muttered. "She found that leak in 2 days. Greg's team had it for months," another said. Some were impressed, others were threatened. By week 4, Emma's name had become a lightning rod in the halls of Thompson Development. One afternoon in the break room, Emma overheard it. "She must be sleeping with the boss. I mean, how else does a cleaning lady get a seat at the table?" The words hit her like ice water. She didn't say anything, just left her coffee on the counter and walked back to her desk, cheeks burning, hands trembling. That night, she didn't sleep. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if she belonged here at all, wondering if every nod or smile from David was now ammunition for someone else's gossip. The next morning, David found her quiet, distracted, not like herself. He waited until late afternoon before approaching her desk. "Walk with me." They stepped into the rooftop terrace, a space rarely used, overlooking the city, with its expensive lounge chairs and decorative succulents. "You heard something," David said, not as a question. Emma didn't answer at first. Then she nodded barely. David's jaw tensed. "What did they say?" "It doesn't matter," she replied softly. "It does." Emma finally looked at him. "They said I must be sleeping with you, that there's no other reason someone like me would be working here." David's face darkened. Emma added, "I'm not surprised. I thought maybe my work would speak for itself." David was silent for a moment. Then he turned toward the terrace door and barked over his shoulder, "Give me 10 minutes." He walked straight into the executive conference room where a handful of his senior managers were preparing for a strategy session. He didn't wait. "If I ever hear one more whisper, one more sideways comment about Emma Parker that isn't related to her performance or professionalism, I will fire you. On the spot. I don't care how long you've been here or how much revenue you've brought in." The room fell dead silent. "Do you know why she's here?" Because she's smarter than half of you. Because she found problems your teams missed. Because she works harder in one afternoon than most of you do in a week. His voice was low, dangerous. And let me be clear, I don't care where someone started, only where they're going. If that threatens you, there's the door. He didn't wait for a response. He walked out and left the silence behind him. 2 days later, Emma was invited to accompany the field team to a site visit in Mar Vista, her first chance to see a live construction zone, blueprints in action, real-world logistics. She was excited, nervous, but mostly honored. David insisted on driving them himself. They pulled out of the parking garage just after 10 a.m. The traffic wasn't too heavy, and the car filled with sunlight and the quiet hum of the radio. For a while, neither said much. Then David spoke. "You know, I didn't grow up in Beverly Hills or even the nicer parts of L.A., Emma smiled. "Me neither. Where were you raised?" "Riverdale." The name hung in the air like a bell. David gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Riverdale?" Emma glanced over, puzzled. "Yeah, my mom, Carmen Parker, raised me there, tiny apartment above a laundromat. You probably wouldn't know it." David slammed on the brakes, pulling into a gas station lot. Emma flinched, alarmed. What's wrong?" David turned to her, stunned. "Your mom. Was she Carmen Parker, tall, always wore her hair in a braid, walked with a limp?" Emma's eyes widened. "Yes. Wait, how do you know that?" David swallowed hard. "My mom was Nancy Thompson. We lived across the hall. You used to help my mom fold laundry in the hallway when we were little." Emma's mouth dropped open. "Your name was Davidi back then," she whispered. "You used to sneak your snacks into my backpack when I forgot lunch." David nodded slowly. "I remember the stickers you used to collect. I still remember your laugh." They sat in stunned silence, the traffic blurring around them. Emma covered her mouth. "Oh my God. David, I haven't thought about that apartment in years. I remember the smell of Mrs. Ramirez's tamales on Sundays, and the green curtains your mom had." David's voice cracked slightly. "We used to sit on the stoop and talk about getting out. I swore I'd build skyscrapers. You said you wanted to open your own business, hire people who needed second chances." Emma's eyes welled with tears. "I guess we weren't just dreaming." David exhaled a laugh, the disbelief still settling in his chest. All these years, and the person who had unknowingly reignited his conscience had been beside him all along. The drive to the Mar Vista construction site felt like slipping through a time machine. Neither David nor Emma said much after the Riverdale revelation. There were too many memories unfolding between them, fragmented images stitched together by time and emotion. Emma stared out the window, then finally spoke. "Do you remember the chalkboard wall your mom painted in the kitchen?" David smiled. "She called it the dreaming wall. Said if we could write it down, we could make it real." "You wrote skyscraper with 3 S's once," she said, laughing softly. David chuckled. "And you wrote CEO. You said one day you'd have an office with a couch so you could take naps and no one would question it." Emma shook her head, tears stinging the corners of her eyes. "I can't believe we lost each other all those years." "We didn't lose each other," David said gently. "We just took the long way back." The site in Mar Vista was chaotic in the way construction zones always are. Steel framing half-finished, forklifts beeping, men shouting over the whir of machinery. Emma followed David across the gravel, a borrowed hard hat slightly loose on her head. One of the foremen, an older man with sun-leathered skin, approached them. "Mr. Thompson," he said with a nod, then glanced at Emma, unsure. "This is Emma Parker," David said. "She's with me." The man's posture shifted, respectful but guarded. Emma stepped forward and extended a hand. "Nice to meet you. I've never been on a site before. Mind showing me around?" Surprised, he took her hand. "Sure. Name's Hector." As David watched from a few paces back, something unexpected happened. Emma didn't just nod at people. She spoke to them, stopped and asked questions, wanted to know how long they'd been on the job, what their workday looked like, how hot it got under those helmets. One worker complained about having to share gloves. Emma made a note. Another mentioned a daughter who wanted to study architecture. Emma asked which school, and then she asked the question David had never thought to ask. "Do you feel safe here?" The crew was stunned into silence for a second. Then came a flurry of honest answers. David stood quietly, listening. For years, he'd built towers and bridges. He'd managed deadlines, budgets, supply chains. But he'd never earned what Emma earned in 20 minutes. Trust. By the end of the site tour, the team was joking with her like she'd been there for months. David walked beside her on the way back to the car, shaking his head in disbelief. "You're a natural." Emma looked up. "What do you mean?" "You just connected with a team of construction veterans in a half hour. I've had guys here for 10 years who barely nod when I pass." She shrugged. "I just asked about their lives." "Exactly," David said. "And I think we need more of that." Emma raised an eyebrow. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to change this company. For real, culture, policies, direction, everything." Emma laughed nervously. "David, I'm just an assistant." "No, you're not." They stopped beside the car. David turned to face her, serious. "I want you to be more than that. I want you to help me run this company as a partner." Emma blinked. "You... what?" "A real partnership, not a figurehead. I've spent 2 decades building Thompson Development into a money machine. But it's hollow. We can do more, be more. I've seen what you can do, your mind, your heart, your instincts. You see people, Emma. I just see spreadsheets." Emma was stunned. "This is everything I've ever wanted. But are you sure? Because putting me on a poster for diversity is one thing, giving me power is another." David didn't flinch. "I'm not offering you a charity role. I'm offering you a seat at the table because you earned it." Emma looked down, unsure. "People will talk." Again. "Let them. While they talk, we'll build." The wind picked up around them, carrying the sound of distant hammers and drills. Emma folded her arms, still processing. "If I say yes, I want to start something meaningful, not just another high-rise." David nodded. "What did you have in mind?" She looked him in the eye. "Riverdale." He blinked. "I want our first project together to be in the neighborhood where we started," she said. "Affordable housing, real design, safe, sustainable, dignified places for people like our moms, for people like us." David took a breath. "You think we can pull that off?" Emma smiled. "We've both already done the impossible. Why stop now?" The next morning, the entire executive board received a memo, effective immediately. Emma Parker has been promoted to executive partner, overseeing culture reform, ethical development, and sustainability initiatives. All department heads will report to both Ms. Parker and myself on joint projects. Signed, David Thompson, CEO. The reactions were mixed. Some were thrilled, others were furious. But no one dared challenge David, not after the way he'd defended her before, not after the financials from Nordman Heights had validated every word she'd spoken. Emma's new office sat beside his, freshly painted, simply furnished, and filled with sticky notes and sketches of what she wanted to build. She didn't bring in luxury furniture or nameplates. She brought a picture of Liam and a notebook labeled Riverdale Project. By the end of the week, she had assembled a working group of architects, engineers, and community planners. She worked late, answered every email herself, and scheduled meetings with local leaders to ensure the development met real needs, not just blueprints. And when David looked at her, in the hallway, in meetings, during strategy sessions, he didn't see a housekeeper turned assistant. He saw the little girl who used to sit with him on the stoop, drawing skyscrapers in chalk and dreaming about something better. Now she wasn't dreaming. She was building. The sign went up quietly one Monday morning. Future site of Thompson and Parker. Building homes, restoring hope. Emma stood across the street in Riverdale, eyes locked on the dusty lot where the new project would break ground. This was the place where her mother used to walk her to school, where David had once played hopscotch in shoes a size too small, where dreams were born and buried in equal measure. Now, it was the starting line. The launch of Thompson and Parker, a new division of Thompson Development, wasn't a press conference affair. It wasn't about buzz or glitz. It was about substance, vision, something real. And it began exactly where it should, right here, in the place they came from. The Riverdale project was like nothing the company had ever built. Instead of luxury condos or penthouses, the blueprints featured wide sidewalks, solar-paneled rooftops, and rainwater harvesting systems. Every home was energy efficient. Each building had space for vertical gardens, shared courtyards, and outdoor reading corners. A childcare center stood at the heart of the community. Emma had fought for every detail, not for design points, but for dignity. "This isn't charity," she reminded the team during planning meetings. "This is justice." And slowly, the pieces fell into place. David, once consumed by budgets and timelines, now found himself reviewing proposals for green roofing, comparing community-based daycare models, and pushing for local hiring on the construction crews. At first, the board thought he was losing his mind. Then the media showed up. It started small, a write-up in a local business blog titled "The CEO Who Went Back to His Roots." Then came a podcast interview. Then a segment on a national morning show featuring Emma speaking to students at her former elementary school. She stood on stage in the same worn auditorium she'd once cleaned after hours with her mom. "When I was your age," she told the crowd of wide-eyed fifth graders, "I used to think the word CEO was just for people born into it. But now I know it's for anyone who refuses to stop dreaming." The room erupted in applause. That clip went viral. Suddenly, everyone wanted to talk to the woman who had gone from sweeping floors to designing cities, but not everyone was clapping. Inside Thompson Development's boardroom, discontent brewed like a slow storm. "This isn't scalable," one shareholder snapped during a quarterly meeting. "There's no profit margin in low-income housing." "Our job is to grow shareholder value," another said coldly, "not teach life lessons." David sat at the head of the table, unmoved. "If your version of growth leaves entire communities behind," he said, "then we're not building anything. We're just stacking bricks." A vote was called. Some wanted to cut funding to Thompson and Parker, rebrand it as a short-term philanthropic effort. Marketable, disposable. David pushed back hard. He put his CEO position on the line. "This is the future," he told them, "with or without your blessing." He won the vote. Barely, but it was enough. Back on the ground, Emma kept working, often 16 hours a day. She met with every single worker, from site managers to truck drivers. She created listening sessions where people could voice safety concerns. She hired a part-time nurse for the construction site. She arranged financial literacy classes every Thursday for anyone who wanted to learn. She didn't sit in a glass office and send emails. She showed up, in boots, with a clipboard. And when a contractor's wife went into early labor, Emma was the one who drove him to the hospital. Word spread fast. For the first time in company history, workers spoke more to her than to the executives. And they listened when she spoke back. The first house was completed 6 months after groundbreaking. It wasn't big, but it was bright, clean, safe. David and Emma toured it together the day before the handover. "There's something different about this," David said, running his hand along the polished railing. "It's not just a house," Emma replied. "It's a second chance." The next day, They handed the keys to Maria, a single mother of 4 who had been living in her car for 6 months. Maria clutched the keyring to her chest, trembling. Her children ran from room to room, shouting over each other, discovering closets, squealing about their own beds. Emma stood silently in the doorway, then cried. Not the silent, composed tears she was used to holding back. She sobbed, because this was real, because this was exactly what she had dreamed of, all those sleepless nights hunched over textbooks with Liam snoring beside her, because this, finally, was what building something truly meant. Later that night, David stood in the middle of the nearly finished courtyard, watching the solar lights flick on one by one. Families were beginning to move in. Children were laughing in places where, not long ago, only silence existed. He wasn't holding a profit sheet. He wasn't checking quarterly forecasts. He was just watching, feeling, and for the first time in a long time, it felt right. Not successful, not strategic. Right. He took out his phone to call Emma, to tell her something, anything, maybe just to hear her voice, when the screen lit up with a number he didn't recognize. David Thompson speaking. Mr. Thompson, this is Clarissa Price, with the National Council on Innovation and Urban Development. I'm calling to inform you that the Riverdale project, under the Thompson and Parker division, has been nominated for the National Innovation in Housing Award. David was stunned. We'd like to invite you and Ms. Parker to speak at the summit in Washington next month. Your work is being seen as a model for sustainable and community-driven development nationwide. David didn't speak at first. Then he smiled, slow and full. Thank you, he said. You'll be hearing from us soon. Washington, D.C. gleamed under the soft glow of an autumn dusk, but Emma Parker had never felt smaller. She stood in the wings of the Grand Atrium Ballroom, dressed in a modest navy gown she'd borrowed from a friend, clutching a folded note card in her trembling hands. The ceiling above her looked like something out of a movie, all chandeliers and marble, and people sipping champagne in crisp tuxedos. This feels not real, she whispered to David, who stood beside her in a tailored black suit. It's very real, David said, adjusting his tie. And you earned every bit of it. Emma exhaled, shaky. You should speak. You know how to talk to these people. David shook his head gently. No. Tonight, they need to hear from you. A few minutes later, the host stepped onto the stage. Cameras flashed. Applause rang through the atrium. And now, the announcer said, the National Innovation in Housing Award goes to Thompson and Parker for their groundbreaking work in sustainable, community-first development in Riverdale, Los Angeles. The room erupted. Emma froze. David leaned close and whispered, "Go show them what a real leader sounds like." Emma stepped into the spotlight. She didn't need her note card. She didn't even look at it. She stood in front of hundreds of influential leaders, policymakers, CEOs, academics, and told them the truth. I used to clean houses for a living, she began, and some nights I still do. I'd work long hours, come home, help my son with homework, and then stay up studying until my eyes burned. She paused. I come from a neighborhood where ambition isn't the problem. Opportunity is. We're taught to dream small because big dreams don't survive where the rent is high and respect is low. The audience was silent, riveted. But someone gave me a chance, not out of charity, not out of guilt, but because he saw what I had to offer. We built something, not just homes, but dignity and hope and opportunity for people who never thought they'd be more than invisible. She looked out across the crowd, her voice clear and steady now. I'm not special. I'm just proof of what happens when someone opens a door and someone else has the courage to walk through it. Now, the standing ovation lasted nearly 2 full minutes. The next morning, headlines screamed across every major outlet, from housekeeper to housing hero. Emma Parker redefines urban development, Millionaire and made partner to rebuild America's communities. Thompson and Parker, the future of social enterprise is here. Interview requests poured in. Emma declined most of them. She wasn't chasing fame. She was building something bigger. 2 weeks later, Emma sat in David's office overlooking the downtown skyline, her fingers wrapped around a coffee mug. "I want to start a foundation," she said suddenly. David looked up from a report. "A what?" "A non-profit. Not just buildings. A place that trains women, single parents, people from low-income backgrounds, teaches them business skills, finance, entrepreneurship, helps them start their own ventures." David leaned back, intrigued. "You've already got a name, don't you?" Emma smiled. "The Nancy and John Foundation." David's chest tightened. His mother's name, her father's. Emma nodded. "They gave everything so we could dream. This is how we honor that." David didn't speak for a long moment. Then he said quietly, "Let's do it." Things moved quickly. Partnerships formed with local universities, housing authorities, and grassroots non-profits. Thompson and Parker became more than a development company. It became a movement. And David made a decision that shocked even Emma. "I'm donating my house," he said one afternoon. Emma blinked. "Your house? The mansion in the hills? It's not a home. It's a monument to a version of myself I don't want to go back to. I want it to be something more, a training hub, a launch pad." Emma was speechless. "You're serious?" "I've never been more serious." The house was converted over 6 months. The bar became a community cafe. The guest rooms were redesigned into dorms for visiting students and entrepreneurs. The home theater turned into a lecture hall. The garage was fitted with 3D printers and design software. And in the center of it all, a plaque mounted above the entrance, the Nancy and John Center for Social Innovation. One Friday afternoon, Emma sat in what used to be the formal living room, now filled with people sketching project plans and discussing impact models. She sipped coffee while reviewing a grant proposal. A familiar giggle interrupted her focus. "Mom, look what I made!" Liam, now 5 years old, bounded over, waving a sheet of paper. His stick figure drawing showed a smiling Emma standing in front of a house labeled Mom's Company, with people holding hands below the words, "Helping the World." Emma choked back a tear. David walked over, glanced at the drawing, and crouched beside Liam. "Can I hang this in my office?" Liam nodded proudly. "Yes, because it's about your company too." David smiled. "Our company, but more importantly, your mum's dream." He stood up, looking around the room, at the activity, the energy, the purpose. He had built skyscrapers, signed billion-dollar deals, traveled the world, but he had never felt more grounded than in this moment. He hadn't just changed a company, he had changed his life. That night, after most people had gone home, David was in his office when his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, but something told him to answer. David Thompson speaking. A pause, then a voice, crisp and accented. "Mr. Thompson, this is Sophia Lantos with the United Nations Human Settlements Program. We've been following your work through Thompson and Parker." David straightened in his chair. "I'm honored. We're hosting the Global Urban Future Summit in Geneva next quarter. We'd like you and Ms. Parker to present your model. It's being considered as a potential framework for community housing in developing nations." David blinked. "Global. United Nations. Geneva." He leaned back in his chair, stunned. "Thank you," he said slowly. "We'd be honored to share our story." And in the quiet that followed, David realized something remarkable. Once upon a time, he had built towers to rise above everyone else. Now he was building bridges to lift others up. The sun bathed Riverdale in a golden warmth, casting long shadows across the fresh pavement and pastel-colored homes. Kids ran through the small park near the community center, their laughter mingling with the rhythmic buzz of bees over the flower beds. It was a perfect day, a historic day. David Thompson stood beside Emma Parker on a small wooden stage in front of a newly built house, the 100th home completed under the Thompson and Parker initiative. Rows of families gathered on foldable chairs, parents holding toddlers, teens huddled in the back, elderly neighbors wearing ribbons that said, "Thank you." And at the podium, a 5-year-old in a button-down shirt and crooked bow tie beamed with pride. "My name is Liam Parker," he declared, voice small but confident. "My mum helps build homes for people who didn't have any. And now they do, so they can sleep safe and dream big." Applause broke out like a wave. Emma wiped a tear from her cheek. David's throat tightened as he watched the boy, the same child who once clung to his mother's leg in a quiet kitchen, now standing tall before a community reborn. "I wrote a poem," Liam added, shuffling a little. "It's called Home Means Hope." The crowd leaned in. Emma's hand clutched the edge of the podium. "Home means a place to laugh and cry. Home means looking up at the sky. Home means food and hugs and light. Home means you don't have to fight." The silence after was thick with emotion. Then came a thunder of applause, louder than any they'd heard all day. Later that afternoon, the celebration continued at the Nancy and John Community Hall, once a dilapidated gym, now a center for workshops, daycare, and weekend farmers markets. Emma stood at the front of a wide classroom, marker in hand, leading a group of 20 new entrepreneurs, all women, all first-generation college students, all dreaming of businesses that did more than chase profit. She drew circles and arrows across a whiteboard, explaining how social enterprise could empower entire neighborhoods. David watched from the hallway, leaning against the doorframe with his arms crossed, smiling. He didn't belong at the front of the class anymore. His job now was mentorship, support, storytelling. He had found peace in the background. Since the awards ceremony in Washington and the call from the UN, their movement had exploded. The Nancy and John Foundation now operated in 3 states, with pilot programs underway in Chicago, Atlanta, and Phoenix. Emma split her time between building projects and public speaking. She had become a symbol of possibility, not in a polished commercial way, but in the most human way imaginable. People saw her and believed, if she can do it, maybe I can too. David, once a man obsessed with margins and market share, had shifted. He didn't care how many floors a building had anymore, only how many lives it could hold, how many children it could keep warm at night, how many families could plant something and watch it grow. As the sun dipped low over Riverdale, casting long amber rays across the streets, David and Emma walked slowly down the sidewalk where they once played as children. The houses stood proudly now, painted fences, raised garden beds, welcome signs on every porch. Emma paused by one house, watching a couple tend to tomato plants while their 2 kids drew chalk art on the driveway. She smiled, soft and full. "Do you think we really made a difference?" David didn't answer right away. Instead, he pointed to the family in front of them, the father wiping sweat from his brow, the mother pulling weeds beside him, both laughing like nothing else mattered. Then he spoke, voice low. "We didn't just build homes, we rebuilt hope." They walked in silence for a few more minutes before a voice called out, "Mr. David, Ms. Emma." 3 kids bolted from the other side of the street, running straight to them. One hugged Emma around the waist. Another high-fived David, who bent down to catch the third in his arms. "My dad said you helped get him a job," one boy said proudly. "Now he's building a house in Chicago." Emma laughed. "Your dad's going to be a legend." "You built all these houses?" another girl asked, wide-eyed. "No," David said gently. "We just opened the door. Your families, your neighbors, they built them. And you made the rules fair." the girl replied, nodding like a tiny mare. That's what my mum says. David glanced at Emma, who smiled like a secret had just been confirmed. As twilight deepened and the porch lights flickered on one by one, Liam came bounding down the street toward them, arms wide. "Mama! Uncle David!" Emma crouched just in time to catch him. He hugged her tightly, then turned to David. "Can we keep changing the world?" he asked, as if asking for dessert after dinner. David ruffled the boy's hair, eyes misting over. "We never stopped." That night, Emma and David sat side by side on the same bench near the playground they had once run through as barefoot kids. The neighborhood looked nothing like it did back then, and yet it felt exactly the same. Only now it carried a heartbeat that pulsed with resilience and purpose. "Remember when we sat here as kids?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. David nodded. "You told me you were going to open a company that helped people. You told me you were going to be so rich you'd never need anyone." They both laughed. "I think we both got it a little wrong," David said. "And a lot right," Emma replied. They looked out across the homes, the lights glowing warm inside every window. Emma exhaled slowly. "What now?" David leaned back, eyes on the stars blinking into the night sky. "Now we plant more seeds. Let others water them. Let them grow." Emma took his hand, not out of romance, but out of understanding, a silent promise that this, what they had built, would not stop with them. It would ripple outward, through cities, through lives, through generations, because bricks may build walls. But purpose builds legacies. Sometimes the smallest moments change the biggest lives. If this story moved you, leave a like and subscribe for more.